So part one of this project is to create some basic shapes from some given materials. What I like to do is to break your students up into different groups and assign each group a different set of materials. For my example, I went outside and I just found some trash and leaves and natural materials that were around my house, and I used those to arrange them into the different basic shapes that I gave for the examples. Now when you arrange these, try to get the essence of what the material is. Rather than creating a perfect half circle or a perfect square or a line, give it the good contours that make up and show what your object is. In this case, if I wanted to do a half circle, well, rather than doing a perfect edge circle, I let the edges and contours of the leaves show through. This will add a lot of interest and visual appeal to your final design because people can start to pick out what materials you used when you created your font. The other thing to pay attention to is the contrast between the values of your object and the background that you're photographing. Whenever you take these pictures, we want the computer to easily recognize the contours and outer edges of each of your shapes. So if I've got a light material, I try to put it on a dark background. Conversely, if I've got a darker material such as this one, I try to put it on a light background. And when I photograph them, this will give me some better results once I put it onto a computer. The final thing to note is that if you have a photograph that's maybe too blurry or out of focus, those can actually be okay too. So don't discard them if you think that your camera was shifted a little bit. You can still work with those, and sometimes they'll give you some fun, interesting results. Once you've got your images transferred to a computer, now let's start part two of vectorizing the shapes. I've launched Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to go to File, down to New, and let's create a new document to work in. The size of our document needs to be 11 inches wide and 17 inches tall, and we're only going to work on one artboard. We'll say Create. This will give us our work area, and we need to place each of our images into this file. So let's go up to File, down to Place, and let's locate where our images are saved to. I've saved mine into a folder called Shape Examples, and I've also taken some time to rename the file based on what the shape is or what it was made of. To select all of your images, you can click on the first one, go down to the very last one, hold down Shift, and that'll get all the ones in between. When we say Place, this will take just a second. Notice that your images will follow your cursor, and it's going to do this until I click and drag to place them into my document. Now at this point the size really doesn't matter. I'm just trying to place them into my document, any particular place, and even if they're off the edge of my document, that's okay too, because I got about 14 different images that I'm working from, and I just want to be able to see them and easily access them. You may choose to use just a couple of these images, or you may actually wind up using all of them. One thing I like to do is to kind of group together my darker images away from my lighter images. That's because when we start to vectorize these, it'll be a different process to swap around the colors, and we'll get into that in just a second. Next, we need to open up our Image Trace panel. Go up to Window and look for Image Trace, and if you don't see it checked, that means it's not open. And we'll click it and open it up. Image Trace is what we're going to use to vectorize our images and turn them into a nice high contrast artwork. So to do this, I'm going to use my selection tool. The selection tool is the black arrow at the top of your toolbox. I'm going to zoom in by hitting Command and the plus sign just so I can see what I'm working in. And we'll scroll down here. And I'm going to select this first image. Clicking on it, I know it's selected because I see my little bounding box around this. There's an X going through it, and my image trace is lighted up. In order to vectorize your artwork, click on the word Trace at the bottom of the Image Trace panel. It may give you a warning saying, hey, this is a large image and it'll take some time. That's okay. We'll say okay to that. Give it some time to think about it. And then after a few seconds, you can see it's nice and vectorized. Now when it vectorizes this, it's going to do it as a black and white, high contrast photograph. And sometimes it'll pick up on certain details that you want to keep, and sometimes you may not want to keep them. The next thing to do is to play around with the threshold to adjust how light or dark your image is. So I'm going to click it and drag it less, and this will make it lighter. It's way too light. Or I can drag it up to more, and then I can make it slightly darker. That's pretty good. That's closer to what I want, even if it has some extra little bits that I may not want. Let's make it a little bit darker. That's pretty good right there. What I really wanted to see is the essence of my sticks and the objects that I used. Once I'm finished with this and I like the results that I have, I still have my image selected. Look at the very top of your control panel for the word expand. When you expand it, this will break it up into a normal vector graphic, and then I should be able to edit it. Let's go through each of our images and go through the same process. So I'm going to select my next image. We'll scroll down so I can see it. With it selected, click on the word trace. We'll say OK to that warning. Give it just a few seconds, and then it vectorizes or turns it into a high contrast. Then I can go through and adjust the tolerance of or the threshold of my image. Once you get the shape that you like, look for the word expand at the top and expand it out. I'm going to pause the video and go through each one of these, image tracing them and then expanding them once I'm finished. Now, the final step for vectorizing your objects has to do with the objects that have a black background and a light object. And those were the ones that were over here on my left-hand side. What I need to do is to invert the colors. Everything that's black needs to be white, and everything that's white needs to be the color black. To do this, I'm going to use my selection tool, the black arrow, to click on that particular object or that particular artwork. Then we'll go down to go to Edit, Edit Colors, and we're going to invert the colors. Do the same thing for each other one. So select the second one, go to Edit, Edit Colors, and we'll invert those, and repeat the process for any other ones that you have that were a light object with a black background. I think I have one more up here. Select it, Edit, Colors, and then invert those colors. You should now have all of your pictures on a good, solid, white background. Part 3 of this project involves cleaning up our shapes and removing any unwanted parts of our vectorized objects. The first part we need to remove is the white area of our vectorized object. To do this, I'm going to use my Direct Selection tool. This is the white arrow that's right next to the black arrow selection tool at the top of your toolbox. With that white arrow chosen, click anywhere that there's a white part of an object. You can see it'll highlight itself whenever I hover over it, so you can tell if it's selected, but I'm going to click once. When I do click, you can see that I've got little bounding boxes and I can see all of my little anchor points. Also, if you look at the bottom of your toolbox, you can see that the white swatch is selected for the fill color. This is important because we can go up to Select on the drop-down menu, choose Same Fill Color. And this is going to tell Illustrator to look for the same white color everywhere on your artboard. With that selected, we can hit the Delete key, and it will delete everything away. Now all I'm left with is artwork that has just that solid black color for each of my artboards. The next tool we need to use in order to clean up any stray lines or any unwanted particles or bits is our eraser tool. The eraser tool, if you look in towards the middle of your artboard, may be hiding underneath another tool. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. It was hiding underneath my scissors. It's the eraser. It looks like kind of a kneaded eraser or a regular art eraser. This tool acts like a brush in that I can click and drag, and it will erase away whatever is inside of that circular area. Now if I need to, I can make that area larger by using my bracket keys. The open and close bracket key will make it larger or smaller. The larger it is, the faster I can delete something. But obviously the smaller it is, the more details I can get into and smaller nooks and crannies. So working back and forth using the bracket keys, making it larger and smaller, erase away any unnecessary lines or particles or bits of your artwork that you may or may not want to keep. I'm going to speed it up now and let you watch me go through the whole process of cleaning up my artwork. There. Now that I've erased away all the parts that I don't want to keep, I'm left with the forms that I want to use in my letter forms. I'm going to use my black arrow selection tool and click on each one and drag them off of my artboard and onto the gray area. This will get it out of the way for the fourth part of this project where we actually start to build each of the letter forms. The final part of this project, part 4, involves constructing the letter forms from the shapes that we've created. I've given you a template as a guide for creating each of the different letters. So to place it, let's go up to File, down to Place, and search for the Alphabet Template JPEG. With this selected, click on the word Options and make sure Template is checked on. With Template checked, when we click the word Place, this will place our template into our Illustrator document on its own tracing or template layer. Now if yours was placed slightly off-center to where your artboard is, the way mine is, that's an easy fix. Let's find the Layers panel. I see mine is down here at the bottom. We'll click on the little lock icon. That will unlock our template layer. Then we can use our selection tool to move it into place where we want it to be. There it is, nice and centered. With that done, we can go back down to our layers and lock down the template layer, then reselect layer 1, which is what we're going to work on. If we zoom in, you can see how you can use this template to help design each of your letter forms. I've given you each of the letters in 3 different styles. The first is a basic sans serif style that doesn't have any of the extra little feet. The second is a bold serif style that has the little extra finishers to all the different parts of the letter form. And the third is a calligraphic or a script style. Whatever you choose to do, you can use these as a guideline, and I invite my students to be as creative as possible as long as we can read the letter forms that they're creating. So to build out each of the letter forms, let's look at the shape of the letter and also look at the shapes that we're working with. For instance, the A is basically 3 straight lines, unless I did a calligraphic A. So if I look at my forms, try to find the ones that have the shape that you want to work with. So I'm going to choose this one. With the shape selected, we'll go up to Edit and Copy. The keyboard shortcut is Command-C, and I'll come back over here and go to Edit and paste a copy of my object into here. You always want to work from a copy because we never want to destroy the original one. So with this selected, if I need to scale it down, use your black arrow selection tool and click on the little edge of the bounding box and you can drag it down to resize it. We'll place it back up here. Or if I need to rotate it, I can move my cursor just on the outside edge, click and drag, and this will rotate it into place. However you need it to go, you can easily reshape, position, and rotate it into place. If you need to get rid of parts of it, simply select your eraser tool and then click on the parts that you want to get rid of. So there's the edge of that one. Let's get the other side using another shape. Actually, I like that one, so I'm going to do a copy of this one. We'll paste it back into here. I'll get my eraser tool and let's get rid of this top portion and keep the bottom portion. Grab my selection tool again. We'll rotate it. I'll place it up here and we'll scale it down, put it right about there. Now let's do a crossbar. I like this little shape, so I'm going to make a copy of it. We'll zoom in so I can see it. And I think that's just about right for how the A should look. So there's an A using all of our different shapes. Once you get a form that you like, we need to group it all together just to make it easier to select. If I was to click on it now, I would be selecting each of the individual parts. So to select the entire letter, I'm going to click on the outside and drag over all of it. Notice now that the entire object is selected. And I want to select it as a group. So let's go to Object and down to Group. This will group it together so the next time I need it, I can simply click on it once and everything is selected. I'm going to speed up my video now and show you how I create a variety of the different next set of letters. And when you're finished, you can see how quickly and easily you use your pre-made shapes to create each of the letter forms. I recommend my students do the entire alphabet, or at least the letters in their name, so that they can spell out their name and see what their letters look like once they're used. Now, if you want to take it to the next creative level, you can add color to your letter forms. I've gone ahead and done this for the second row. And how I use color can give me a lot of different interesting results depending on how I want them to blend together. To select a color, you can open up your swatches panel or also your color panel. The swatches will simply be some pre-made or predefined swatch colors, whereas the color panel will let you choose the entire spectrum. If you don't see these panels, you can find them under the Window drop-down menu. Now, to use the color, the other panel I like to open up is my transparency panel. With transparency open, this will also let me change up the opacity and the blending mode for my colors. You can see this happening with the F, how the two colors are overlapping one another. It gets slightly darker. Well, that's because the blending or the transparency for each one is slightly different. Let me show you how this would work for the letter H. Let's say I selected each little part of the H and I gave it its own separate color. We'll work in shades of green. So maybe this will be a light green. This one will be slightly a darker green, and we'll do the darkest green right here in the middle. So already that looks pretty cool. If I wanted to, I can select the individual forms and either lower their opacity. So instead of it being 100%, let's say we'll make that 50%. We'll make the other one behind that one a little bit lower too, say 60, and we can keep this one at either 100 or maybe drop it to 80. With the lower opacity, you can see the parts that are overlapping one another. And just like with watercolor strokes, you can build it up. Or, if I selected these, I can choose a different blending mode, and these will give me some drastically different results. Let's bring this back up to 100% and change up the different blending results. It really depends on how they overlap one another. This is a part where you simply play around and you get kind of different results based on whatever mode you have selected. Once you've got this, go ahead and save your Illustrator file, and you can either use each of the individual letters to, like I said, create your own name, or create the name of your child or your classroom, or save it and print it off and showcase your own vector forms by themselves. If you want to get rid of the template layer, you can go down to the Layers panel, click on the word Template, and then click on the little trash can that's at the very, very bottom. That will get rid of that layer. We'll say yes to that, and this will leave you with your individual letter forms. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'd love to see what you want to work with. If you want to find links to any of the resources that we used and other examples, I'll put them in the description for this video.